What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Kings Court with me, Vincent Miracle, here for Fansided.com, GoldenGateSports.com, HoundSports.com, and of course, SacKingsNation.com. So be sure to go all four of those websites for all your daily Kings news. And joining me today is special guest. We've had him on the show before plenty of times. You guys love him, James Ham. James, how you doing?
Pretty good. What's going on, Vince?
You know, not much. Just actually saw the breaking news, and if you guys haven't seen it yet and you guys are watching the show, for the second year in a row, Ben McLemore was kept out of the Rising Stars Challenge. James, what are your thoughts on what just came out for the new kind of setup for the Rising Stars Challenge this year?
Well, I know that Ben McLemore is going to be so incredibly disappointed. I know he kind of had set his sights on this being his big breakout, and getting a chance to play in this game was really big to him. So I know he's going to be upset. I know the Kings are going to be upset. They have no one to blame but management, just because that's what happened this season. When you throw away a season, players get snubbed. And tomorrow, when DeMarcus Cousins may or may not make the All-Star team, if he doesn't make it, then things are going to get really ugly in Sacramento. So today it's Ben McLemore. Again, I believe that Ben McLemore deserved to be there. I believe he deserved to be there over Caldwell Pope, and definitely over a few other guys like Zach LaVine. It's just one of those things where at the end of the day, you're on a losing team, a team that's lost 6 in a row, that's lost a bunch, something ridiculous like, 4 out of 19 they've won, something like that. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but this team is off its rails, and I don't know how you put it back on its rails. But there's a long time left in this season, and the Kings need to figure this thing out.
Definitely. So, for those who haven't seen it yet, the roster for Team USA, because now it's going to be a World, and the first 2-year players between Worlds and Team USA is how they split it up this year between the Rising Stars Challenge. So, for the Team USA roster, you have Trey Burke, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Michael Carter-Williams, Zach LaVine, Shabazz Muhammad, who could he be replaced since he's actually injured? He's supposedly be out. Could that possibly be that Ben McLemore can fit in right there?
Well, I would say yes. I think the first replacement would probably be Ben McLemore. There's no one else who's really deserving, and you're looking at another wing-type player, a 2-3. So I think McLemore could get in if Muhammad's not going to play. But we'll see. I mean, you just don't know. I think last year we had the same thing where there was an injury replacement, and it went to someone else other than McLemore again, even though McLemore had better stats. So it's a disappointment for sure.
Definitely. As I continue down the list here, you have Nerlens Noel, Victor Oladipo, Elfrid Payton, Mason Plumlee, and to round it out for Team USA is Cody Zeller. You switch over to Team World roster, you got Steven Adams, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Bjorn Bagnovic, I don't know how to pronounce his name, from the Nets. You have Gorgie Dang, Dante Exum, Rudy Gobert, Nikola Mirotic, Kelly Olynyk, Dennis Schroeder, and Andrew Wiggins. So, other than the fact that we don't see Ben McLemore on this on any of these rosters, what are your thoughts of this new setup, James, and how they're setting it up for the Rising Stars Challenge? And other than Ben McLemore, do you think there's any other first or second year players that were probably snubbed from this team?
I think Ben is by far the biggest snub. I mean, I'm sure there are other guys out there that have had decent breakout seasons, but for my money, I mean, McLemore averaging almost 12 points a game. His PER is low, but so is Caldwell Pope's. His true shooting percentage is twice, it is like 30 points higher than Caldwell Pope's. He's a very good defender. He's done a lot of things that he needs to do to sort of, get these accolades this season. But at the end of the day, it's the assistant coaches who vote on this, and they didn't choose him. So clearly, it's either the funk that the Kings are in, or maybe just that they thought that they had other players that they wanted to see more. And I don't really get that, but it happens. It happens all the time.
Yeah, one of the biggest surprises that made this roster over Ben McLemore, because I agree with you, I think he's the biggest snub from it, was Zach LaVine. I mean, Mo Williams is getting a ton of the minutes in Minnesota while Ricky Rubio's been out. And, he hasn't really shown much. I mean, he barely plays. I don't see how they would see him being a better fit or a more, use on that team with Ben McLemore being there, other than the fact that Zach LaVine's already in the dunk contest. So, I mean, that was just a big surprise to me. But I want to get on to Cousins.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
McLemore was in the dunk contest last year, and he still didn't make it too. So that's not an excuse. Again, the formatting change really seems to hurt him in this situation because they had to take a certain amount of rookies. I think it's down to him and Caldwell Pope for that last spot. And, Detroit's been winning and the Kings have been losing, and I think that's what it comes down to.
Right. I want to actually move on to Cousins because we're going to be hearing about the reserves, I believe, what you said tomorrow, and I believe that's what's been going on. We're going to find out tomorrow if he makes the roster or not. What do you think his chances are of him actually making it? Because I think that he is an all-star this year for how he's been playing. But what do you think his chances are? And if he's not an all-star, what do you think happens to DeMarcus Cousins going forward this season?
Well, I had my percentages at about 60-40 he's going to make it. But over the last couple of days, those chances for me are dwindling. I think we're down to probably a 40-60. And maybe even a little bit less than that, because you just saw what happened to Ben McLemore. Mm-hmm. People are upset. They're upset with the Sacramento Kings, and unfortunately, you can't take it out on an owner. You can only take it out on a player. And I have a sneaking feeling that DeMarcus Cousins is going to pay the ultimate price of not getting into the All-Star game because of the ownership's decision, management's decision to let go of Michael Malone in December. So I think it's going to be brutal, and the outcome, what happens after that, only DeMarcus Cousins knows. Either he takes it and he uses it as motivation, or he blows this thing up. And I think there's as good a chance he gets really, really angry if he doesn't make the team and starts pushing some buttons, than there is that he takes it as motivation and the Kings go on some roll. I just don't see it. I think this is a defining moment in the Sacramento Kings season. I wrote on Sunday about, look, we haven't reached the lowest point yet for this team.
Right.
They haven't reached the lowest point because management still hasn't admitted that they made a mistake. But at the same time, the lowest point is still ahead of us. They could have lost to the Knicks on Monday. That would have been a new low. Clearly, they're up against a good Toronto team this afternoon. And so they could stretch this thing to a 7-game losing streak. You just don't know where the lows of the low is with this team. But I don't think we've gotten there yet.
You brought up the management and getting rid of Coach Michael Malone. I want to get your thoughts on when that all occurred and how surprised were you? And kind of when are they? You said it. They haven't really admitted that this has kind of been a mistake and letting him go. When do they kind of start realizing that maybe this fast-paced offense that they really want to get isn't what fits this roster? I mean, they don't really have the shooters, in my mind. They don't have really the shooters other than Ben McLemore to really space the floor to have that up-and-down offense that they want. Their star player's best, and DeMarcus Cousins is best when he's down in the low post. So, I mean, they're not winning. So, I mean, what were your thoughts when they let go of Coach Malone? How surprised were you? And when do you think, or if you ever think, they will start saying, maybe we did make this mistake?
Well, I was shocked that it happened when it happened. I wasn't shocked that it actually happened. So, I mean, we had heard for a little while that they weren't happy with Malone, that there was some things that they had done during the summer that would have, clearly paved the way for this to happen. So it wasn't just the moment when it happened was like, holy cow, they did it. But at the same time, it was like, okay, well, I mean, we knew that they were going to do something like this, that they would make a rash decision. They saw a little opening in the schedule where the Kings had lost games because Cousins was out due to illness. They knew that their schedule got decidedly weaker, and they easily could have rattled off a bunch of wins in a row. So they had to pull the trigger because that was the moment to get rid of Malone, which is foolish. And they're paying the ultimate price right now. They've lost this team. They've lost the locker room, and that's not something that that they can fix. They can't set this thing right. I don't think a new coach will help that. I don't think new players will help that. This management team needs to regroup and they need to, realistically, they have to show some contrition at some point. They have to say, look, we get it. We made a mistake, and, we'll try better next time. But until they do that, if they keep acting like they didn't do anything wrong here, and the losses keep, stacking up, here's the real question. If you're going to, put Michael Malone on this leash and you're going to tell him you want this type of offense, you're right. Shouldn't you get him the players to play that offense? How do you walk into the season with a rookie who's never played a game as your primary three-point specialist, and Ben McLemore, your second-year guy who realistically had failed miserably in his rookie season? How do you walk in with those are your primary three-point shooters? Darren Collison isn't a horrible three-point shooter, but you can't use Darren Collison as a set three-point shooter because you don't have another ball handler. So, there's this huge catch-22. You bring in guys like Derek Williams. You bring in guys like Omri Caspi. You bring in Ramon Sessions. These guys are not known as knockdown three-point shooters. So what exactly was the intent here? And I think it's at some point somebody's going to pay dearly for the mistake that was made here. It may not be by the end of the season, but I wouldn't doubt that a few other people were put on very short leashes, since the Malone firing. Because look, if you're going to step out and say this is a decision that we're making, then when it goes horribly wrong, somebody has to pay the price. And, right now it's the season ticket holders. It's people who watch the Kings basketball that are paying the price. They watch the team go from really good to horrible in a flip of a switch. So at what point does somebody else, lose their job in this situation? And I think that's coming pretty quick.
We're with James Ham from Cowbell Kingdom here on the Kings Court, sponsored by the Quality Shop located in downtown Roseville. For quality clothes at a quality price, be sure to go to the Quality Shop. Yeah, James, you're saying someone needs to pay the price. Another person who I think is paying the price right now is their new head coach, Ty Corbin, who's getting a lot of scrutiny right now from fans because of the way this team is playing right now and the way his rotations are going. And I'm not saying that he doesn't have anything to do with some of these losses, but at the same time, I think that as soon as he took over that head coaching job after Malone left, the team by itself, the morale of the team and the way they played was already starting to go down because they were disappointed on what happened by losing Coach Malone. I think that, now that the fans are looking at Ty Corbin, they're just saying it's put on him. He needs to start taking over the locker room. But at the same time, in my eyes, his job isn't really secure. He doesn't know if he's even going to be here next year, and everyone assumes he's not going to be. So, what's your thoughts on Ty Corbin thus far, and do you think he has a chance of possibly being the head coach next season, or who are some candidates that are in your mind right now that can possibly be taking over that spot going into the 2015-16 season?
Well, I don't think Tyrone Corbin has any shot of being the head coach next season. At all. This is already, we're seeing a lame duck coach, and it's not his fault. The biggest mistake that he made was saying yes. He should have never said yes to coming aboard on this team. He should have never said yes when they offered him the head coaching job. He had to know that this locker room was going to be lost with Malone. Malone is a general. He walks into a room and he commands respect. And not that Tyrone Corbin doesn't do that, but he's not as good at it. He's not, he's a very quiet, reserved guy. He's a guy that, does have some X's and O's. But, look, there's nothing Tyrone Corbin can do here. As far as X's and O's, he's doing what he can. He's being fed a directive from the management staff to push the tempo. Pushing the tempo is leading to turnovers. You're seeing DeMarcus Cousins lead fast breaks, which is part of what their faster paced tempo idea is, to have Cousins lead the break, to have bigs get out and run and lead the break after getting rebounds. Really, this is foolish. This team has come off, they've just fallen apart. And as far as coaches going forward, you got me. They have George Karl waiting in the wings, ready to take over this team, but I don't think they want George Karl. They've talked to Mark Jackson, but I don't think they want Mark Jackson. They've talked to guys like Vinny Del Negro. Again, do you want Vinny Del Negro? I think a lot of people are like, well, maybe you wait around till the offseason and you hope that a guy like Thibodeau gets fired or someone like Scotty Brooks gets fired.
You bring up Tom Thibodeau. Sorry to interrupt you, but I mean, would they really want a guy like Tom Thibodeau? Because I mean, he's not really meant for that offensive style that he wants. I mean, Thibodeau is a defensive-minded head coach, and they kind of just fired Coach Malone, who was a defensive-minded head coach. I'm not saying that Malone is a Tom Thibodeau or like the second coming of Greg Popovich or anything, but they had a good thing going, and then now to go to Thibodeau, who's like basically the same type of minded coach, would he even really be a good fit if they were ever to talk to him and he would lose his job in Chicago, which I don't really see happening?
Yeah, well, that was my point. My point is that if you're looking at those two guys as options, neither one of them are known as offensive geniuses. So, I mean, who are you looking at? There's no one that's floating around that's known as some offensive genius. You can't bring in a young, inexperienced coach. We already know that because of, DeMarcus Cousins and the other issues that this team has in the locker room. You've got to bring in someone who's experienced and hope that they can grab the room. And if they can't grab the room, then this thing gets a whole lot uglier leading into the new arena in 2016. And that's just, they've made this error themselves. They had something building, and now they're back to square one, and they've got to figure out how to get out of this nightmare of a season while building something. And I think if you write this season off as like a Ben McLemore build season, or you try to get Stauskas on point, those things are good. That would sort of give you some sort of silver lining to this season. But overall, I don't think there's any other silver lining. I mean, you waste a season of Rudy Gay's career. You waste a season of DeMarcus Cousins' career. You waste a season of Darren Collison. You just don't get these years back. And the Kings, even though they're playing so horrible right now, there's still a good shot that they don't get to keep their draft pick. I mean, right now they're right around the 10 or 11 seed. They've got to be 10 or worse to keep the draft pick from going to Chicago, and maybe that's part of what they're trying to do here. Maybe it's like, look, we want that draft pick one more time, but that's just foolish. I mean, this whole season, realistically, it feels like amateur hour, and it's really embarrassing for Kings fans. It's not fun to cover. It's really like spun out, and you hope that they can somehow get some positives out of it, but I just don't see it going forward.
Do you think that this kind of is a problem because of the way, and this is from what I'm hearing and what I'm listening and what Kings fans ask me, and they kind of want me to ask you in a type of way of, they kind of have like the Jerry Jones syndrome where Vivek Ranadive and Pete D'Alessandro want to put their hands in too many places and trying to move too fast all at once. Do you think that could possibly be a problem with the team going forward right now, that in their mind they want to have it their way too fast and they're too set in their ways? Or maybe they should kind of just see what they have in front of them and see how each plays out and not really focus on this up-pace offense that they so, it seems desperately want.
Yeah, Vivek's got his hand in everything, and I think that's one of the major issues here, that he does micromanage. That's been something that has been told to me multiple times, that, like, look, everything in the entire building is being micromanaged from top to bottom, and that's really hard to do. And at some point, people always say you have to let your basketball people do the basketball things or your football people do the football things. But when you hire people that don't want to stand up to you and say no or yes, or maybe we should do this, or we have to do this, we can't do that, when you don't hire those people, then you're just going to keep getting the same issue. Look at the situation in San Francisco where they have a great coach, and, the 49ers have a great coach, but management and ownership bind together, and they decide to run the guy out of town after he'd made it to a Super Bowl and a couple of NFC championship games. Those things just don't make any sense. If you can't get out of your own way, then you probably shouldn't be in the business. And it's a shame. I know he's new to this and he wants to dabble and he wants to try new things, but what's going on up in Reno, it's not working. This whole Grinnell offense, this wild, run and gun, and that's something they want to bring to Sacramento. It's like, how are you going to shoot 60 3-pointers a game where you don't have a single guy averaging 40% from behind the arc? It's just, again, you get your idea, your concept, and the reality on the same page. And that's something that this group has not done yet. They don't understand that, like, look, you walk into last season and you have, let's say that team had 6 shooters. And those 6 shooters are Jimmer Fredette, Marcus Thornton, John Salmons, Isaiah Thomas, Patrick Patterson, and Gravis Vasquez. How many of those players are left on this roster?
I think
the answer is 0.
Yeah.
So you get to pay every shooter you have, and then you want to run some up-tempo offense that requires shooting. Like realistically, what is the idea here? What is the concept that you're going for? And when you're looking at this Kings team, like, again, if you can't shoot the ball, this team is shooting and making 3-pointers at a historical low for the Sacramento Kings. It's bad basketball. And the last thing you want to do, if you have a big man like DeMarcus Cousins and a secondary guy like Rudy Gay, who's not a true 3-point shooter, is not surround them with shooters. And that's what the Kings have done. It's just, really, that's the flaw in this whole thing. They have no bench and they have no shooters, and that's why they keep losing.
Yeah, they don't really have anyone on this team that's a Klay Thompson that can put up 37 points in a quarter. They don't really have anyone on a team that can do that right now. So, but
nobody does.
that was a crazy game. I saw your post game reaction show. That was a game to watch. Even though sadly it was against the Kings, but that was NBA history right in front of our eyes. That was a nice game.
But you just take your hat off when a guy goes nuts like that. I think we've all been in a gym when somebody catches fire and they're in the zone, even if it's for like 2 or 3 minutes, and you just sit back and go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm watching this. And that's what happened. I mean, there are good basketball players, and then there are great basketball players, and then there are great basketball players who literally for a moment in their life, time stands still. And that's what happened for Klay Thompson.
Let me ask you this, just to get off topic for just a second, and ask you about Klay Thompson. Do you think he should be an All-Star?
Oh, heck yeah.
Do you think?
I think that Curry and Thompson should both be All-Stars. I think that team is so good that you can't have one representative from that team, and those are your 2 best players. In my mind, the All-Star team should have 6 guards and 6 bigs. And if I'm looking at the 6 guards, of course it's Curry and Harden as starters, but Klay Thompson, Westbrook, CP3, and Damian Lillard, and I think that's your group of guards. Monte Ellis has had a good season. Mike Conley Jr. is a quality player, but I don't think that they're in the same ballpark as those other players. And I think that that's what you have to look at, like, in the backcourt. And Klay Thompson, to me, is, maybe a top 15 player who has moments where he's a lot better than that. And he's impressive. And the Kings missed out on him when they drafted Jimmer Fredette and let him fall. So kind of an interesting. I don't blame the Kings for that. I didn't like Klay Thompson coming out of college either. He had an issue with marijuana. He in his pre-draft interviews, he was stuffy, quiet, and almost he's exactly what you would expect out of a guy who his dad played in professional basketball. Mm-hmm. A little arrogant, a little quiet. And I think that hurt him. And now the Warriors clearly are reaping the benefits because he's developed so well as a defender more than anything else. I mean, you knew he was going to be able to score and the 3-point shooting, you knew all that. But when you add the defending and the rebounding that he does, he's an impressive player.
Yeah, and no one would really, you can't really just know that someone's going to come in and be that type of player. No one knew Klay Thompson was going to come in and be that good as he is and develop this fast and have Jimmer Fredette be in New Orleans right now. But I want to get into February, not about the All-Star game, but we're coming up to the trade deadline, and Kings really have been in talks with little small things. You're hearing that Ramon Sessions is possibly a target for I don't even remember that it was Ramon Sessions and Norris Cole are looked at to be in Charlotte, I believe, to back up for Kemba Walker. But is there any
I think both Charlotte and Detroit are both looking for point guards at this point because of major injuries to
Right.
Kemba Walker and to Brandon Jennings.
Right. So is there any trades or any ideas? I personally don't see a trade that really helps this team even going forward. I think this team is right on track to be where everyone kind of assumed they would probably be around like a 30 to 35 win team. They can still possibly get there, but I don't see a player that can come in and really help this team. But do you see the Kings making a move at all near the trade deadline to, possibly get a stretch four that they've been looking for, move Jason Thompson or something like that in that ballpark?
Well, I wrote a piece yesterday, and to be honest with you, if you're gonna judge this team, if you're gonna pull the pieces apart and look at this team, you have to look at the Kings starting unit is actually one of the top 5 starting units in the NBA. So you can not love Ben McLemore or Darren Collison or Jason Thompson, but the fact is, when those 5 players are on the court together, they played extremely well. Now, you take away Rudy Gay for a couple of games with injury, you take away Darren Collison for a couple of games, you take away DeMarcus Cousins for 12 games, and this team isn't very good. And the fact is, it's not so much the starters, it's the bench of this team. And if I'm going to look at the bench, too, I'm going to say, who's my best players off this bench? And the first guy you come to is Carl Landry. So if Jason Thompson is doing his job in the starting lineup and the starting lineup is good, why mess with that? And if Carl Landry is doing what he needs to do as the backup 4, I don't mess with that either. So I circle the center position where I think Ryan Hollins, if he's playing 8 minutes a game, that's fine. But that's not how the league works. You have guys go down, like DeMarcus Cousins went down. And if you're going to go into a 10-game stretch with Ryan Hollins as your primary center, you're going to lose a vast majority of those games. And so I think you have to get better there. I think, everyone knows that both Omri Cassidy and Derek Williams in the final years of their deals, you could probably upgrade that position. I like what Cassidy's brought this season. I don't like what Derek Williams has brought. Whatever Derek Williams does on the offensive end, he gives up twice. On the defensive end, he's just a sieve. He doesn't even try most nights on the defensive end. I think Cassidy's ability to push the ball has been great. He's given the Kings a second ball handler on the second unit, which is very nice. So, again, I'm okay with Cassidy sticking around for a little while, but the Kings really do need a 3-and-D guy. They need a guy at the wing, at the 2 and the 3, that can hit three-pointers and that can play defense, and they don't have it. So I guess the third position of need is clearly your backup shooting guard position. Nick Stauskas, I don't want to call him a bust because he's a rookie, but let's be honest, he's averaging like less than 4 points a game in 14 minutes of action. He's getting action. He's not hitting anything from the perimeter at all. He showed flashes here and there of coming out of this, but there's a lot of layers to the Nick Stauskas problem, and I don't think the Kings. I think if the Kings can move Nick Stauskas at the deadline and have a deal to bring in a quality player, they will. And then the last position that we look at is Ramon Sessions has been so bad, and everyone was clamoring for Ray McCallum, but the fact is Ray McCallum hasn't been any good either. So at what point do you try to look for someone who's different? And that's why, I pitched, if you're going to look at Ramon Sessions going to the Charlotte Hornets, then I would like a guy like Brian Roberts who can really shoot the ball at the point guard position. A guy almost like what Aaron Brooks was supposed to do in Sacramento, but now he's doing in Chicago. That guy who at the point guard position can really, really light it up. So you could actually bring in a guy who can handle the ball and shoot a 3, and then you can move Collison over to play some backup 2, and Collison can really hit the corner 3. So now all of a sudden, not only do you have multiple ball handlers, which Kings don't have at this point, but you have multiple three-point threats to put alongside Cousins and Gay and Thompson. So that's kind of what I think, yes, they do make a deal. I think, no, it won't be major. And if it's major, I think it would be shocking. I don't think they're going to get the piece they want, and they're going to walk into this offseason a little frustrated with that fact. But that happens. I mean, the NBA doesn't just allow you to become a good team. You got to work for it, and I think the Kings have tried a lot of gimmicky stuff to get good quick, And at the end of the day, it's not sustainable. So go get me players that are sustainable. I do like the Collison pickup, though, this offseason. And I think this team would have been better with Collison and Isaiah Thomas. But, hindsight is 2020.
Definitely. Yeah, you brought up a possible trade scenario for Ramon Sessions for possibly Brian Roberts. I have actually Brian Roberts backups, and he's kind of a two-guard. He played it in San Antonio. I like Gary Neal as a player that the Kings could possibly target during the trade deadline just because he can play both the 1 and the 2, and he can shoot the ball pretty well as well. But
he's a guy who's an ISO guy, too. He's not so much a system guy. And that's why I like the idea of Roberts a little bit better because he can catch and shoot where Neal likes to create for himself. He's like a bigger version of Nate Robinson. And so I understand what you're saying, though. Neal is on that just as well as far as guys that the Kings could look at if they are going to move Sessions.
Yeah, and then the last guy, just to put it out there, because I heard about Detroit as well, losing Brandon Jennings, they need a backup point guard, was Kyle Singler. I think that him playing as like a 2-4 type of player, he can shoot the ball and he plays pretty decent defense. He can be a nice guy to target near the trade deadline as well.
Yeah, he's a shooter. I mean, that's the guy that you never know. He might work out alongside Cousins. And that's what you're trying to find is pieces that would fit alongside Cousins. And the Kings don't want to give away Ramon Sessions. They believe that Ramon Sessions does still have value. I know that when he was looked at as a piece that they were going to move for Jordan Farmar, Farmar may or may not have even ever played here in Sacramento. They probably would have bought him out because obviously Farmar hasn't been picked up by anyone of late after he was waived by the Clippers. But the Kings were going to trade Sessions to the Clippers for Farmar and 2 number 2s, 2 second-round picks. So the Kings were looking for assets. And so that might be something that they're looking at too. Like I think Brian Roberts, he gets you a second-round pick. And I think Gennaro Pargo, if you do a deal for Pargo, that would get you 2 second-round picks, because you're actually giving them something of value that can help them today. And the Kings need to stock up. They don't have any first-round picks or second-round picks that they can move at all until I think it's 2019. So they're in a bind with regards to their draft picks because of the J.J. Hickson trade for Omri Cassidy a couple of years ago, and because of wheeling and dealing and giving away second-round picks all day long, which the Kings' new management team has done. And I don't blame them for trading second-round picks to get out from underneath guys like Jason Terry and stuff like that. But still, I mean, those are assets, and now you don't have them, and that's sort of the long and the short of it, right?
Right. All right, so now we're going to get into fan questions. If you have a question that you want to get on the show, you can email your questions to kingscourtpodcast@gmail.com, or you can tweet in your questions to @VMCenter. That's me on Twitter. So let's go ahead and get to this first question here. It's actually 2 questions from the same person, but it's mainly just about the NBA and not the Sacramento Kings. But he said, here's a question I would like to be answered. How is it okay for teams to tank and not get penalized or take their picks away because it's ruining an already diminishing league? So he kind of just wants to hear your thoughts on how you feel about tanking and if teams should be penalized for losing on purpose.
Well, Adam Silver has always toed this line that, look, he doesn't believe that teams are tanking as much as he believes that teams are building with young players and sort of going through, the ups and downs of doing that. Like Philadelphia, you could say they're tanking and they've won more games since Malone was fired than the Sacramento Kings have. So I guess you could say, tanking. I know Minnesota is a team that also looks like they've tried tanking. Pekovic and Rubio and Kevin Martin have been out of the lineup forever. They're going with 4 or 5 super, super young guys on most nights. But, you got to develop players. It's look, I get the tanking issue, and I get why people are upset about tanking. But if you're a Sacramento Kings fan right now, and you're looking at this team, and you got 39 games left in the season, and it's already over, would you rather them go out there and try to win, say, 12 or 13 or 14 more games? Or would you rather see Ben McLemore play 35 minutes a night, see Stauskas play 25 to 30 minutes a night, finding spots for these young players to develop, dealing away Sessions and using Ray McCallum as a guy who's going to play substantial minutes at the backup, 4, to back a point, giving Quincy Miller minutes at the small forward spot and the power forward spot. I mean, are those things that you would like to see, or would you like to see the same team go out there and lose the same way every single night? So I don't know that it is all the way tanking. I mean, clearly it looks like some of these teams are tanking, but, you know, a team like Philadelphia, they're trying to put it all together at one time. Nerlens Noel, you know, developing, Michael Carter-Williams developing, you know, Joel Embiid, all of them coming together at one time. And, you know, I think what you could tell with that team is that their plan is to develop, and that's why their head coach hasn't been fired, even though they keep losing. So expectations are that they will take their lumps now, and in the future, they'll be much better for it. And so I don't know that I can fault the team for doing that.
Alrighty, and then to move on, his second question is, why does the NBA let LeBron do whatever he wants when he's helping ruin this league by self-branding and making up his own teams wherever he goes to win championships? That's why he thinks he'll never be great, because he keeps pulling out other all-stars to join him instead of playing against them. So how do you feel about self-branding in the NBA, James, and players recruiting other players to join them on teams? Do you think that's ruining this league, or do you think it just makes it more fun to watch on TV?
I think it's hurt the league, but at the same time, I think the league needs LeBron James to be great, and they need LeBron James to sell tickets, you know, the entire league wide needs LeBron James to be on a good team that's pushing for the finals every year. You know, losing Michael Jordan was such a blow to the NBA, but even at that time, there were a lot of great players. I think the league doesn't have as many great players anymore. I mean, if you look at, you know, who's left, who's still in their prime, and, you know, you've got LeBron and you've got Kevin Durant, but who else can you say is great? And I don't think anyone is great in the league outside of those two. I think they're really good players. And that's why, like, a door is open for DeMarcus Cousins to be a top 5 NBA player. I mean, he easily could sneak in and be a top 5, be a top 3 NBA player, because I think, you know, guys like CP3, they're fading a little bit. You know, Kobe Bryant clearly is gone, and Garnett is gone, and a lot of the great players are fading away, and it's sort of like a time for the NBA to rebuild. But during that time of rebuild, you do need someone to stand up against Western Conference teams. I think what we're seeing in Atlanta, the revival of the Hawks, is pretty incredible. You know, they're using a San Antonio Spurs system to, like, develop something. And so, you know, maybe they don't need 3 stars to do it. And I think that those teams are, you know, have great merit, you know, teams like, you know, again, the Spurs. But, you know, when you look at the Spurs, is there really any difference between what the Spurs have right now and what LeBron James has? I mean, the Spurs have 3 Hall of Famers, and they've had 3 Hall of Famers for a decade. And so while they drafted all 3 of those players, you know, the only difference between them and what LeBron is doing is that they were drafted to a team and kept re-signing, and he's getting players to go and join him. So sometimes it's going to work out. Sometimes Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh and LeBron James works, and sometimes it's not, because I don't know that, you know, a team with Kyrie and Kevin Love and LeBron is a championship team. You know, and I think that they're going to get beat by a more team-oriented, you know, club like Atlanta. And when it comes down to it in the finals, and that's who will represent the Eastern Conference. I mean, I guess you could blame LeBron for everything that's wrong in the NBA, but if you do that, you got to blame Michael Jordan for starting it, because he's really the one who did the whole branding and everything else. So I guess you could be mad at it, but, you know, there are plenty of free agents, there are plenty of people to trade for, there are plenty of ways to get better in this league. And you could have Carmelo Anthony on your team and be just god-awful, you know, and it doesn't matter how many. Look at how his big 3 of him, Amari Stoudemire, and Tyson Chandler worked out. It didn't work out at all. You know, and there's been enough teams that have failed at trying to assemble the big 3 as are that have succeeded. Actually, a lot more that have failed than have succeeded.
Yeah, and it's not like Michael did it by himself either. If you want to bring up Michael Jordan, he had Dennis Rodman and Scottie Pippen. That was that big 3 back then as well. So I mean,
Yeah.
there's always those type of players that come together, whether it be, like you said, by drafting or by saying, hey, come join us. There's always some type of recruiting going out there everywhere. Like Pau Gasol in Chicago with Joakim Noah, Derrick Rose, and now the emerging Jimmy Butler, who I think is possibly going to get the Most Improved Player award.
Yeah, he looks pretty solid.
All right, and then going on to the next question here, it says, my question is, would the Kings benefit from firing Pete D'Alessandro and getting a new GM who has the philosophies more suitable for our talent and our players, like someone who is more defensive-minded and wants to play a slower half-court style to better utilize DeMarcus Cousins?
Well, that's really tough. I mean, I don't want to say that Pete needs to be fired because that's not my place. You know, I think somebody will pay the price for this, and I'm not sure who that will be. But you know, when something goes so epically wrong, somebody has to be held accountable. And as of right now, they've passed the buck and you know, mixed and matched. I don't think that. Okay, so if you're going to replace Pete D'Alessandro with a defensive-minded general manager, which I'm not sure that there is actually such a thing as a defensive-minded general manager, but if you're going to replace a guy, he's got to be able to stand up to Vivek and say, this is what we're doing, and you know, let me do my thing. Or, you know, I think a better point that we brought up earlier is that you probably just need to add the pieces that make sense next to DeMarcus Cousins and Rudy Gay, which I don't think this Kings team has done. I think that this team is, you know, still, it's broken. It doesn't have all the pieces in place. Everyone knows that. And until they get, you know, the shooting, and until they get the, you know, the couple of pieces that they need, then they're going to continue to struggle because this team isn't complete. And the only way it worked early on in the season is when everyone was towing one rope together. And Michael Malone was the one who was anchoring the end of that pole. And at this point, when you wipe out your anchor on the back end of a tug of war, you're going to lose. You're going to lose. And I just don't know. I don't know that having a defensive-minded guy, what you need is this strong, long-term NBA guy that can say, no, I'm not doing that. That's crazy. Yeah. No, we're not going to try 4-on-5. No, we're not going to try the Cornell-style offense. None of these things that you're coming up with make any sense and will not work. We have to win with is talent. That's how you win in the NBA. Talent and a system. And you had a system and you had talent that was working together. You still didn't have enough early in this season. You still were going to have to make additions, but they were minor tweaks. And now you're looking at, you know, again, roster renovation, and that's just not good when you're, you know, a year and a half away from opening a new stadium and you're supposed to be pushing for the second round of the playoffs in that first year.
All right, yeah, it really just sounds like they need someone to really take charge and say, this is how it has to be, not just accepting, you know, probably just one idea and saying, okay, let's just go with that one idea. He needs to have someone who could be the opposite, the yin to the yang, if that makes any sense at all. Just someone that can say
no. They needed somebody to say firing Michael Malone could be catastrophic, and no one said that.
Right.
And no one said it because no one believed it, because they all thought that they had the locker room themselves, which was foolish. And they didn't have the locker room, you know. Michael Malone had that locker room, and now they're paying the price for it.
All right, next question is, simple question. How do we get back to being a playoff contending team?
Man, you have to have a coach. You know, that's the first step. You got to have somebody that the players buy into. This team does have talent, but they have enough talent to get by and not to win it all. And you need a coach that can put this thing together, and then you need to add pieces. And it's tough. You know, you got a small window here, a 3-year window where you got McLemore, Collison, Gay, and Cousins under contract, and the Kings need to capitalize on this window. And if they don't, this is going to go down as one of those epic failures, because they did have, you know, part of the pieces to succeed, and they just missed because of their own, at this point, their own, you know, tripping over their own feet.
Next question is, could they bring Coach Malone back?
They should have. I mean, they should have never fired the guy. The answer to that is no. They can't bring him back, not without firing the entire management staff. And then even still, most people believe that it was Vivek Ranadive that fired Michael Malone anyways. Like, he may not have actually done the deed. The deed was done by Pete Alessandro, but that it was Vivek who demanded that he was let go. And that's what I'm going to stick with. I'm going to stick with that, like, look, you can't have the owner make that decision and then go back on it. I don't think. I mean, I guess, George Steinbrenner did it with Billy Martin again and again and again. And it seemed to work for the Yankees and the 80s, but I just don't see it. I wish they would, because I think he's a heck of a coach, and they made a huge mistake here. But I don't ever see that happening.
Next question here is, could Rudy Gay demand a trade? I feel he was bamboozled. They said that Malone was going to be there, signed him to an extension, then fired his coach.
Yeah, Rudy Gay could ask for a trade, and DeMarcus Cousins could ask for a trade. DeMarcus Cousins is, actually, Rudy Gay, during this season, he's in the middle of his extension kicks in next year. He's a poison pill player, but I actually believe that the poison pill would work in someone's advantage in this situation, which is strange. Those guys could. And I'm not going to say that they're going to, but I do know that Rudy Gay was not happy. And I do know that DeMarcus Cousins wasn't happy. And I know that specifically Rudy Gay felt like he was left out of the loop and was not at all keen on what happened, especially since they did it so close to him signing his extension. So it really felt like they kept Michael Malone around just long enough for him to sign his extension, and then they fired him. And I don't think that's too far from the case. I think they just assumed that they could smooth it all out, and they can't. So we'll see. They need a coach to come in and clean this thing up and get everybody moving together and a kumbaya moment, and so they can move forward. And again, I'm not bashing Ty Corbin. I'm just the players all look at Tyrone Corbin as a rental, and when your players look at you as a lame duck coach, they're not going to respect you, especially when you do make a couple of errors in the waning minutes of games and cost your team a couple of W's.
Next question is, there's only 2 questions left here, so do you want to see us keep or trade our upcoming pick? And if we keep it, who do you want to see us take?
Man, I wanted the Kings to trade last year's pick, and I want them to trade this year's pick. If you can't get anything of value for it, then don't trade it. The Kings can't technically trade their pick until after they actually make the draft pick. So they're kind of at the mercy of another team. They could have a deal work out that if a player is available, they will draft a player for that team and then trade him that same day. But the Kings can't trade in advance. So they can't trade at the trade deadline. They can't trade the first-round pick. And they can't trade their 2016, 17, or 18, and I believe it's 19. They can trade their 2019 first-round pick. Because there's a step-in rule. You can't trade back-to-back first-round picks. And if you lose your first-round pick to the Chicago Bulls this year, then you can't trade next year's pick as well. But if you keep this year's pick, and you can't trade it because you could lose your pick next year to the Bulls. And you can't trade either side. You can't trade the year after or the year before. And that pick is locked up until 2017, which means that even in 2017, they won't be able to trade 2018's pick until that pick is actually handed over to the Chicago Bulls. So I would either, one of two things, I would just give them the pick this year, just just make sure that you're the number 11 seed if you can, and give away that pick. And so you don't have that hanging over your head anymore. Or I would trade it for a veteran that makes more sense. I think this is a solid draft, but I don't think it's a great draft. You need a big man. You need, all of these positions that we've talked about. You got starters at multiple positions, but you need better players. So I think that they should trade it. And I think again they should have traded last year's pick. They tried to deal this Stauskas pick, but it never worked out. They failed at dealing the pick all the way up until the last minutes.
Yeah, I don't see them trading it. I think they're gonna try and keep it until the draft day and see what happens then. But and to answer the question, I haven't actually even been watching college basketball until I don't watch it until like the middle of February, and then I'll watch it until the end of the season, going up and leading toward it. So I couldn't really answer that question even if I wanted to. And the final,
Yeah, I'm a bit busy with the Kings season. I don't watch a lot of college hoops either. Although there are some good young players, especially Kentucky and Duke.
So the last question comes from an angered season ticket holder. He says, "We're sick of losing. Is there any way we could get the owners to make a move now for a new GM and a proven head coach? Carl, they want more season ticket holders. They make a move now, not after the end of the not at the end of the season. You want to have your season ticket holders renew. You want our new arena with sellout seats. Ownership has a funny way to show us they care. How do we get our ownership to realize this? Don't have class and chant fire Pete, or we want Carl. We also want more impact players. Vince, do you have any suggestions? Thank you." So James, I'm gonna defer that question over to you. Any suggestions on talking to these season ticket holders on why they should renew and possibly firing the GM and getting a new GM and bringing in a proven head coach? I mean, just talk to these guys and give them some moral support here, just something to motivate them to keep watching these Kings games and keep supporting their team.
Well, that's not my job. My job is to point out that the franchise made a giant error, and they continue to, perpetuate that error by not fixing the problem. It's like that Saturday Night Live guy, just fix it. It's like the Kings needed to have a plan A. They had no plan. And planning to fail is failing. Failing to plan is planning to fail. That's what they did. They're failing because they had no plan. And we're very clear at this point that is the case. I mean, if your plan was Tyrone Corbin, then you probably should have been more excited about signing him in the offseason, which they weren't. It just, again, should they fire Pete D'Alessandro? I'm not going to say that. Should someone re-up their season tickets? Man, I'm not going to say that you should or you shouldn't, but I wouldn't if I were a season ticket holder, because I want to know that this team is going to move in the right direction. And, they raised ticket prices a ton, and then they put a product on the floor that was tantalizing for about 5 minutes, and then the team got in their, the management ownership got in their own way and destroyed everything. So I don't know. I don't know if people should actually go and buy season tickets again. I don't know what to tell those people, because I wouldn't. I would be too frustrated and upset. I cover this team, and even still, it's really difficult to cover. Because you don't want to go and watch bad basketball every night. You don't want to watch a team that looks ill-prepared, that looks like they don't care. And a lot of nights, that's what we're seeing now. And it's really shameful. But, they created this mess. And that's, you got to get yourself out of it. I don't know how, though.
Yeah, for me, I mean, if I had to tell you guys anything, if I had a suggestion, it would just be, keep pushing forward with the team. I mean, if you think that there's a chance, if you believe in what they're doing, just keep going out there and buying the season tickets. I mean, I'd be on the opposite spectrum of you. I would, just because I want to see what product they can keep developing going into the new season, going into a new arena. I mean, I personally love going to each game, whether it be a terrible game or a good game. I mean, at least you're there, you're in the environment, because you'll never know. You might see a Klay Thompson go off for 37 points in a quarter. That'd be pretty awesome to see at the new arena. I don't know. But, I mean, that's the only thing I can really say to you. I mean, the product that's on the floor right now really isn't encouraging enough to keep renewing these tickets. But if you have hope and you believe in the management, then that's where I'll say you can go renew those tickets and go to these games every single night. But that's our show, James, man. I really appreciate you coming on the show. Where can people find you online?
They can find me at CaldwellKingdom.com, where I've been for 5 seasons. You can find me on Twitter at James_Ham, Ham. Those are my primary spots. So yeah, find me there.
Definitely, guys. And also check out their YouTube show, Cowbell Kingdom. They got the Cowbell Kingdom podcast. They got Aaron Brewski on there. They do a post-game show after every game, a road reaction show, and also a post-game show that James does at the arena as well. So you guys definitely go check that stuff out. They got great information going there. So, James, again, I appreciate you coming on the show today, man. I'd love to have you back on anytime.
No problem, man.
All right, James. Have fun at the game tonight.
It's in Toronto. I won't be going there, but I'll be watching it.
Well, that's what I meant. Have fun watching the game, and I'll be looking for your road reaction with Rui Thomas.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
All right. Catch you later, James. Bye.
Yep, bye.
All right, guys. So that is the show today. Be sure to subscribe if you're not a subscriber yet. Get those questions in for the next show at the kingscourtpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter at VMCenter. Let me know what you guys all think. Did you like what James Ham had to say? Leave your comments in the comment section below if you agree or disagree with any of the things that we have said. If you're not a subscriber yet, again, subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. Share this on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all the social media websites. Be sure to go on there. Share this video. Leave your comments in the comment section below. Hit that thumbs up button. It really does help us. Go to the Quality Shop located in downtown Roseville. Quality clothes at a quality price. Go to the Quality Shop. And until next time, Kings fans, bye-bye.